Thank you for joining for today's security awareness training. Today's topic is, do you know where your data is? The mission of all our workshops is to help you get more from the technology you already have and to introduce you to new technologies you need to know about. And in this case, security is really the foundation of protecting all your technology. Ongoing employee training is required by the Mass Data Security Law, HIPAA, and other industry regulations. So it's a great idea to make sure all your employees are on the same page. So, big changes in the world of technology. Work used to be a place that you went to and you left at the end of the day. But now with mobile, bring your own device, all sorts of different cloud applications, all of those borders have blurred. And what's emerged is what's known as shadow IT. There's the network, computer and networks and firewall and everything you think that's protecting your office, that's physically located in your office, and then there's everything else that's going on. So it's the tip of the iceberg is what you see. Then there's everything else. 70% of employees use mobile devices for work. 63% of employees access corporate data outside the network perimeter. 1 in 5 employees use cloud apps to share corporate data, and 20% of those use it without IT's permission. So there's a lot that's going on your network that you might not really be aware about. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And then how do you deal about it within your business? Bring your own device. That's a huge trend. These are some stats from the industry. 82% of businesses allow their employees to bring their own device to work. That's a study from Intel. 90% of workers in the U.S. use their smartphones for work. So you've got your email on your smartphone, your contacts, etc. And by 2017, only 50% of firms will provide technology to employees. That's a study from Gartner. That seems pretty extreme, but it really shows what the trends are today. Another big trend is just the role of technology in our everyday lives. So social media at work. Very interesting article from Forbes a while back. 64% of millennials ask about social media policies in job interviews. 24% indicate it's a key factor in choosing a job. And 1/3 would prioritize social media freedom, device flexibility, and work mobility over salary. And I emphasize freedom because that's really how the younger generation views this. This is their communication tool. You'd be shutting them out from the outside world if you shut off all social media. So these are things that you really need to think about in today's workplace. And how do you keep your technology secure? Because the other trend that's going on at the same time, kind of creating a perfect storm, is that there's ever increasing threats. So with the crypto variation of viruses, crypto wall, crypto locker, there's a whole bunch of them. Effectively what happens is this is the scariest thing you can see on your computer. This is a computer that's been infected with a virus, and what happens is it's giving you a notification that your files are encrypted and you have to pay ransom to get them back. Very scary situation. It's a class of viruses known as ransomware because they're trying to collect ransom from you. Infection happens in the background. Most typically, we've gone over this in other training sessions in a lot more depth, but effectively there's either email attachments, hidden executables, or what's known as drive-by viruses. You go to a standard website, your employees are out surfing, they go to a website, well, the ad server might be infected with the virus. So it could be a legitimate website, but the ads, you don't know where they're coming from. They could be spoofed. So the system communicates with a remote server. It gets an encryption key. Everything gets encrypted. So nobody actually, it's a very scary situation, but nobody actually has your stuff. They've basically just vandalized everything you've got, and they've given you a ransom request. Now, in this case, what we would advise is that with a rock-solid backup, you recover from your clean up the virus, recover from a backup. But it's a very scary situation if you don't have a rock-solid backup. So just keep in mind, the cloud, the access, the freedom that people want to have when getting out to the web, bring your own device, all these things come together and create a really rough situation for protecting your technology. So one of the things to look at is, well, how do you even know what's going on your network? And this is a real issue. So this could all be happening behind the scenes. So anybody who's on a service plan with us, we have uh, DNS protection in place for you, and you actually can pull reports if you want to look at the different kinds of traffic. So this is just a random a sampling, but this is showing, if you look at the list, at the very top of the list is the highest amount of traffic on this network is Facebook. Well, that's kind of interesting. 3,600 requests in the last 7 days. So a lot of Facebook traffic on this network. AOL, some businesses use AOL, very rare that a business would use AOL for their own company emails. This is probably some personal use of people going out. So they go out on AOL, it doesn't matter if it's AOL or Hotmail or Gmail, and they could be pulling in viruses. It's not your company's stuff. They could be pulling in anything. The other one here is Dropbox. So that's a real popular file sharing application. Now the thing is, if you haven't incorporated, if you haven't developed a way of your employees to securely share information, we'll talk a little bit about that later, they're going to go off and find a way to do it themselves. And it may just be an employee who's a real go-getter, doing extra work, working from home, and really going the extra mile. But what they may not realize is they're creating a huge security problem for your network. You see Dropbox and iCloud here. So, if you imagine in the old days, if an employee came, you saw an employee taking all your files out of your file cabinets and bringing them over to the Xerox machine and making a copy and walking out with boxes and boxes of files, you'd be asking a few questions. What can go on in this day and age is that can be happening behind the scenes and you don't even know it. All your stuff's walking out the door and you may not even know it. So something to be aware of and to think about in your strategy. This is just another slice of data. This is just looking at the top categories of traffic for a site, which might be a way you want to analyze your network. In this case, this I think was in the last, this is also a 7-day report, but software technology. So these are business applications. You might be out on salesforce.com, legitimate business applications. So that's good. That's at the top of the list, business services. You go way down the list before you find social media here. So it's interesting to know, somebody could be sitting in front of a computer. You don't necessarily know what they're doing. You don't know where your files are. So these are all things to think about. And with our standard plan, you already have this capability in place if you want to basically use it. Another thing that we will do when asked by clients is run security audits. And this is just a snapshot. We look at internal vulnerabilities. One that will show up is what kind of web traffic you allow. And you can control web traffic via your firewall, also with your DNS manager. We've partnered with OpenDNS, which is the leader in that space. We also run external vulnerability scans, where we'll come in, with your public IP address, basically run scans to try to basically attack your network and see what ports are open. So these are things that you want to look at for your network. So you start asking these questions with all these different things going on. Well, the company owns the network and the company owns the data. And then you start wondering, well, where is the data? And you really need to think about this from a number of different perspectives. One is productivity. If you got folks who are on Facebook all day when they're supposed to be working, that's kind of a problem. But you may find management ways. If somebody's getting their job done, and you might be okay with social media. Hey, during your lunch break or take a break, that's fine. You got to have some guidelines around this. But productivity is an issue. Legal exposure. Folks are going out. If you have a workplace where folks are going out to sites like pornography, etc., you might have some legal exposure. That's something to think about blocking. Malware and cyber threats. So once an employee's on your network, they might be doing their work and then they go off and say, I'm going to take a break, I'm going out to a website. Could be a very legitimate website, boston.com, just get the news. And then the ad server downloads a really nasty virus. You got to be on the watch for that. And then loss or theft of data. So, that person who's taken all your files and put them on Dropbox, there's a security risk, big time. But, you got to ask the question, what if they're planning to leave the company in the next few weeks and they've just copied all your company, your customer records? It's important to know what's going on beneath the iceberg. So this calls into play what's known as an acceptable use policy. And what this is basically a document that describes the constraints and the practices a user must agree to before accessing the network. And it's basically outlines. Do you allow Facebook at work? What are your guidelines? People have to, you're not allowed to use Dropbox. Whatever it is that you want to put in your document, think it through. And what this does is it eliminates the I don't know or I didn't know. And we had a case a while back, and just to illustrate, because we work with hundreds of businesses, we've seen all different kinds of scenarios. A business was hit with a really nasty virus, and we went in, scanned everything, all the systems were clean. And then they got hit with the virus again, and what is going on here? It turns out an employee was bringing in a laptop. This was a good employee, going the extra mile, working hard, working at home, and they brought a laptop in and infected the entire network. So the amount of lost productivity when taking down this entire network was enormous, and they didn't really understand that they were doing something bad. So, in your acceptable use policy, you want to think about what are you doing about the bring your own device issue. So a couple of things to think about. One is of coming up with some guidelines of how you use your network. Is one is industry regulations. Mass data security law requires a lot of things: up-to-date antivirus protection, up-to-date security patches, encryption of all transmitted protected information, a lot of things. HIPAA, SEC, PCI, which if you process credit cards, you're bound by that. So you need to take that into consideration. It's not a guideline, it's not a suggestion, it's actually, these are all laws that you need to abide by. Security requirements, strong passwords, screen lockouts, etc. And one of the important things to note is it's actually required by law that your employees participate in security training, which is one of the reasons we do these 20-minute sessions every month, is to help you meet that requirement. But often it's the employees who are really working hard and trying to do the right thing that make a mistake because they just don't know. And then bring your own device is a whole can of worms. Do you allow them on your company network? Do you want them on a guest network? Can employees bring in anything? Do you have any guidelines they have to have up-to-date security patches, etc.? This is something that you need to think through. And then another area to think about is cyber insurance. We get asked a lot to run scans for folks, sometimes vulnerability scans for folks, or work through documentation that the insurance companies require. But this is insurance that will help mitigate losses that result from a variety of security-related issues, data breaches, your business interruption, etc., network damage. The way to protect yourself is all about layers of protection. So education is really your biggest defense is your user training, knowing what your users are doing and making sure they know the parameters of what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and give them some context of the why. I mean, these are laws that are in place. You really can't allow all different systems on your network with no antivirus protection. And then things to consider, that the world is much more complex. There's the cloud, all the applications you run in the cloud. Email. Do you allow employees to check their own webmail when they're at work? We've seen cases of people going out to Hotmail, getting viruses and infecting company networks. So again, it may have never happened in your business, but I can assure you these are real threats, and unfortunately we've seen the examples of this. So different types of data you want to protect. What's your physical security on devices, etc., and how do you handle mobile devices? Then as you start thinking about this, it gets even more complex, because now you have the whole area of, well, social media. You're probably using social media for marketing your business. We talked about the millennials and how important it is to stay connected to the world. So you don't want to, you're not locking people out from the outside world. But really, how you allow employees to use social media is maybe the same way to think about doing personal phone calls throughout the workplace. And kind of the difference is you can see when somebody's on the phone, but when somebody's sitting in front of a computer, they could be doing Facebook for hours and you don't know it. YouTube, Twitter. What are your guidelines about talking about the company? Can they talk? What if they say, "Hey, I worked with this really horrible customer today." What if they post that on Facebook? These are things to think through in your acceptable use. Then you get to different kinds of web traffic. Well, what about if they're going out to Craigslist, Indeed, Monster, different job sites? Now, do you really want to be paying your employees to be looking for other jobs while they're at work? Now, again, if you're running a recruiting firm, your employees are on LinkedIn probably all day, working, developing contacts and opportunities, etc. But, this is about employees who are just basically looking for another job on basically the paycheck you're giving them. And then you get to another area of thinking about this whole file sharing. If you haven't implemented a secure way of users to collaborate, and we can advise you on that, folks might be going out and doing stuff like Dropbox on their own at great security risk to your company, or Google Docs, iCloud. So unbeknownst to you, your stuff might be all over the place, totally unsecured, and with no roles-based access, all your security rules are out the window. This is a major risk for you. So this is something to really think through. We've partnered with eFolder for a business class file sync and share. So if this is something you want to have for your employees, think through the strategy of how to do this and maintain your security. The reason we recommend business class service, and we've partnered with eFolder, is that you can have roles-based access. All the file and folder protections you have on your internal network, you can extend into the cloud. You can actually extend your existing shares that are on your server into the cloud. You also have, very important, you have an audit trail. So you can have administrative rights to tell who's accessing what. It's not just out there and some employees got the password, and the password could be totally non-secure to begin with, and anybody can access anything. You really want to have roles-based access, just like you have that for other things, within your business. Retention policies, mobile device wipe. If somebody loses a mobile device, wow, then what? All the stuff's on there? You want to be able to wipe that remotely. So these are things to think about. In terms of management policy versus technology policy, so you can block web traffic either through your firewall. So we always recommend, as best practice, if you're on a support plan with us, you've got a sonic wall router with Total Secure, you can block traffic right through the firewall. You can also block it through, in our baseline services, we have the Open DNS Manager, very great level of protection. You can set guidelines of what you want to block, and you can do this by website. You can do it any way you want. Just want you to be aware of what's capable, and you may choose that you're going to handle a lot of things through management policy. Hey, you know what, if folks are out on Facebook, I'm okay with that. As long as they're getting their job done, that's fine. Other folks will say, you know what, I've got some employees who are they're just addicted to social media and they can't get their work done. You might want to block it. So think this through and at least know what's possible. All right, so with that, just to summarize, we're trying to keep these all to 20 minutes. In thinking about any security plan, you want to think about where is your data, and it's not like the old days. It's not within the four walls of your office. It's all over the place. Acceptable use policy, get everybody on the same page. And this could be a very simple document. This could literally be the one page that everybody's on the same page with, but it eliminates the I don't know. And then most importantly, the foundation of any security policy is your backup, because your backup is going to save you or not. And fortunately, in the cases that we've worked with folks, because there's no such thing as 100% security. You can do everything right. All it takes is one threat to get through, and that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. But your backup will save you or not. So very important to know. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us. We have updated information on our blog. Check us out on Twitter. We're always updating industry news there. We're on Facebook. And we also put these recorded sessions on YouTube. And if you want us to do a session at your office, let us know. And anytime you have a question, sometimes you might get a warning on your screen. It might be just a standard warning. It might be an indication something's really going bad with your system. Just give us a call. Call us anytime, 978-692-4200. And with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you very much for joining us today.